everybody, episode 808 of the podcast is Serving America, the Intersport Sports Podcast. It is Friday, December 15th, 2023, people. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is having a great day. It is an FFE, a fun Friday edition. Cannot believe we are midway through the final month of 2023, yet here we are, and we got a freakishly loaded Friday episode of the Aaron-Torres Pod. This is what you need to know. We're going to open big picture takeaways as the SEC has released 2024 football schedules with Texas and Oklahoma in the league. Talk about Bama, talk about Georgia. We're not going through all 16 teams, but there are marquee games and marquee storylines. Speaking of marquee storylines, we will do a little bit of college hoops, okay? Big weekend this weekend. We'll talk Louisville, first of all, a debacle. Kenny Payne needs to go. We're going to discuss that, then preview a mega weekend. Gonzaga-UConn, Kentucky-Carolina, Indiana, Kansas, Arizona, Purdue, on and on. Finally, we'll wrap with America's favorite podcast segment where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong. Busy show, busy Friday. Let's not waste any more time. And let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, you don't need me to tell you, actually a very interesting schedule drop from the SEC in football for 2024, okay? So for people who live and breathe this stuff, about 6-7 months ago, the SEC kind of put out who would play who in terms of opponents in 2024, the next football season. Remember, Texas and Oklahoma are coming. Divisions are gone. Well, on Wednesday, we got the actual schedules. This team plays this team on this day. So there's a lot to dive into. Georgia plays at Bama. Bama plays at Oklahoma. So much to get into. I have 5 big picture takeaways that I want to discuss. We're not going team by team. I apologize. If you want the Auburn game-by-game schedule breakdown, there's a great place for that. I'm not sure this is it, but I do have 5 big picture takeaways. Let's get to big picture takeaway number 1. Number 1 is this, and it's really number 1 and number 2. Going away from divisions really helps and really hurts certain teams, okay? So let's dive in, because when it was announced that Texas and Oklahoma were coming to the SEC, obviously we got excited about the 2 new brands in the conference. But the question then became, what does the schedule look like? Do we play 8 or 9 league games? Do we stick with divisions? Do teams move to a different division? Do we go to 4-team pods? Well, what we ended up settling on was 8 league games, 3 rivals stay intact, but then beyond that, and this is the important part, divisions are gone. And so all those teams that were in the SEC West that had to play Bama and LSU and A&M when they're good and Ole Miss when they're good, now you don't really have to. On the flip side, all those teams that benefited from playing Vanderbilt when they were down every year, South Carolina when they haven't been very good, now all of a sudden that is gone away as well. And so takeaway number 1, I don't think there is a bigger loser in the new era of SEC football than the Georgia Bulldogs. And to be clear, for a Georgia fan watching, it doesn't mean that I think your team stinks. They're going to start in the preseason top 5. But when you look at that schedule for 2024, it ain't easy, okay? So first of all, they keep the 3 historic rivals. They will play Tennessee. That game will be at home. They'll play Auburn at home. And then they will play Florida on a neutral. So those 3 rivals, by no means are they the most difficult rivals you could have, but they are not very easy either. Where it gets interesting to me is as follows. It is that Vanderbilt off the schedule. South Carolina, who was not good this year, off the schedule. If there was an SEC East next year, I think those 2 teams would probably be picked to finish 6th and 7th in the SEC West. Those teams are gone. You know who you replaced them with? At Alabama. By the way, early September. So a Georgia team that did not play a ranked team until late October, early November this year. I think Kentucky may have been ranked, but the toughest game that they played really was probably Ole Miss or Missouri, and that wasn't until late October. Now you have to play Bama by the end of September at Bama. They also have at Ole Miss, which I think will be a preseason, probably top 15 team if Jackson Dart returns. So you replaced Vandy and South Carolina at Bama, at Ole Miss. And then, oh, by the way, remember this. You're going to get either Texas or Oklahoma next year. You're getting at Texas. So a team whose toughest road game this past year was at Tennessee. End of the year, Tennessee wasn't very good by that point. They now have at Bama, at Texas next year. And oh, by the way, they also have Clemson in the out of conference. So all of a sudden, that schedule just got so much tougher. No Vandy, no South Carolina, at Texas, at Bama, at Ole Miss, and Clemson to open the season. That is a brutal schedule. Georgia is still great. We think Carson Beck is coming back. Not sitting here saying they're going 3-9, but that schedule just got so much tougher without divisions. And I think they were really the big loser. Now, we're going to talk about Florida in a minute because Florida was a pretty big loser too, but I would say they are the biggest loser. What's interesting is just the way the schedules broke, you can't say that every team from the SEC East ended up being a big loser. I thought it was interesting. Kentucky's schedule, as an example, Kentucky's schedule largely stayed the same. They only have two kind of quote-unquote SEC West teams on the schedule next year, Auburn and at Ole Miss. Now, they do have at Texas because everybody has at Texas. But they also have most of these same SEC East teams that they would have had this past season. So you look at their schedule. Here is the schedule for Kentucky. They still have South Carolina and they have Georgia. Now, obviously, you don't want Georgia, but they do keep Vanderbilt. They actually keep Tennessee in a game at Tennessee. And so you look at it, it's largely the same. South Carolina, not very good. I know Kentucky has lost to them the last 2 years, but I like Kentucky with Brock Vandagriff going into that game. Vanderbilt, you keep Vandy on the schedule. That's a win. Now, you do have to go to Texas, to Ole Miss. It's not easy, but I think Georgia's the biggest loser when you start talking about teams as divisions go away. Now, the biggest winner, I think it's a lot of those SEC West schools that don't all have to play each other. Now, look at a Texas A&M, for example. Texas A&M's schedule is by no means easy. That's not what I'm saying. But you look at it, it ain't hard as it could be either. You know why? You know who's not on Texas A&M's schedule next year? Alabama. No Alabama for Texas A&M. Win for Texas A&M. No more Ole Miss, a team that has given you fits and does not. Lane Kiffin loves nothing more than poking the bear that is A&M. I think he liked poking Jimbo Fisher more than anything. So now that Jimbo's gone, you avoid Lane Kiffin and avoid Ole Miss. Now you do have at Florida. You do have some other tough games. You still play Texas late in the year, and you talk about a game that is as much of a must-watch game as you can possibly imagine. Final weekend of the season, Texas A&M hosting Texas. It's unbelievable. But I thought I thought A&M really benefited about as much as you can. You still have LSU, but no Georgia, no Tennessee from the East, and no Alabama and no Ole Miss from the West. I know it's early to start talking over-unders, but that's an A&M team, and I know we say it every year, but they're going to be better coached. They're going to be better disciplined. I think they can make a big leap from the 7-5 that they were this year. By the way, you know who had the single biggest break with this schedule? It's Bama. So Bama, think about Bama. Couple things. One, somehow, I don't know how all this works, and I don't know how the schedules all come together. Now, look, I will say this for Bama, their 2024 schedule. They do still obviously have the 3 rivalry games, which Nick Saban whined about last summer, but that's neither here nor there. They do still have Tennessee, which is a road game next year, LSU, which is a road game next year, and also on top of that, Auburn at home. Auburn, of course, gave them fits this year. But I find it interesting. And by the way, the schedule is still tough because they still have Georgia at home, and their second to last game of the season before the Iron Bowl is at Oklahoma. So I'm not sitting here saying Bama has it easy, but with the divisions broken up, check this out. No A&M, which I think will be better. And say what you want about A&M. They have given Bama trouble through the years. This year was a 6-point, I think it was a 26-20 game, something like that. Last year came down the final play of the game. Year before they beat Bama. So you know you don't have A&M with a new head coach who actually might know what he's doing. On top of that, you don't have Ole Miss, which again is a program trending up. But here's where I think it's interesting. How about this? At Vandy, South Carolina at home, and Missouri at home. Now, I know Missouri's coming off a 10-win season, but I just bring it up to say that schedule breaks nicely. You trade Ole Miss and you trade A&M for Vandy and South Carolina. Doesn't get much better than that. Really like how the schedule breaks for Bama as much as it possibly can when you have Georgia and at Oklahoma on the schedule. Let's keep it going because I do think outside of the divisional stuff, maybe the biggest takeaway, Billy Napier's kind of screwed at Florida. Okay. And so listen, I feel like I've been very negative with Billy Napier lately. Lost his best offensive player to the portal, Trevor Etienne, not Travis Etienne, who's in the league. Beyond that, I just, his recruiting class is kind of sort of falling apart. I don't think he's a very good coach. I think he gets embarrassed. But what I would say is the SEC in 2024 did him no favors. And beyond that, his own school really did him no favors. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, from the SEC perspective, they do keep those three historic rivals: LSU, Tennessee, which is a road game next year, and Georgia on a neutral. So you get Georgia, you get LSU. Not ideal. They also get at Texas, not ideal. A&M at home. Maybe that one's okay. We'll see what happens. Why do I bring it up? It is because you know who actually screwed Florida more than anybody? It's their own administration, okay? So here is Florida's out-of-conference schedule. On top of an 8-game SEC schedule that includes Georgia on a neutral, LSU at home, A&M at home, who was the big road game? Texas on the road. It's tough. Ole Miss on the road, by the way, as well. Here is Florida's out-of-conference schedule. Miami at home to open the season. I think they'll be improved. Mario Cristobal is really improving the talent level in that program. They play Central Florida, UCF. Don't call them Central Florida. Central Florida fans get mad. They're UCF, but they're a Big 12 school now. Gus Malzahn, they got dudes. And they wrap with at Florida State. And so on top of an 8-game SEC schedule, Florida plays 3 Power 5 teams out of conference. And I'm just here to say, I don't get it. I thought Nick Roush, my buddy from Kentucky Sports Radio, he actually wrote a great article on Thursday morning talking about this, okay? Kentucky has been kind of criticized for playing a light out of conference schedule. And his point was in the new SEC with no divisions, there's no reason to schedule big out of conference games. Now, if you have a rival, Florida State, Louisville, Kentucky, who else? South Carolina, Clemson, then okay, play the game. You don't want to buck history, okay? But at the same time, 3 Power 5 out of conference games. And by the way, there's no benefit for Florida, right? Miami kind of needs that schedule boost, the credibility, beat the SEC team. But if Miami goes into the swamp and wins, then all of a sudden it's Billy Napier's a mess. Come here. You don't want to play there. They're falling apart. And obviously Central Florida, UCF, it's the same exact thing. There's no benefit at all. And so listen, I love big out of conference games. I hope we get 1 million of them. We got Georgia Clemson next year. We got, by the way, Texas at Michigan in week 2. Okay, sign me up. But while I give these schools credit, I don't know if it's actually smart anymore. Again, keep your rival. Play one big game. But it's just not worth it when the schedule is going to be as tough as it is. And so you look at Billy Napier. Look at the schedule for Florida. Billy Napier, I don't think he was going to survive anyway. But when you actually see the schedule on paper, look at the schedule. I'm just going to read it to you really quick. Miami at home to open the year. A&M in week 3. At Mississippi State, Central Florida, at Tennessee, all before the middle of October. That's potentially 3 ranked teams and 5 Power 5 teams before the middle of October. 5 Power 5 teams. You play Samford in week 2. The last 10 games of the schedule are against Power 5 teams, and that's after playing Miami. So we'll do a separate thing on Billy Napier next week because the signing day is coming, and I would argue Florida, nobody needs to close on signing day like Florida does. But man, oh man, this is just bad news. Couple other notes before we get out of here. One, I think Texas at Oklahoma, it's just cool to have them in the league. I don't think there's any amazing takeaway other than this. One, Oklahoma's got a brutal schedule, but you know, it's the SEC. Like, I don't think there's like oh my God, like I don't think it's crazy by anything other than SEC standards. Worth noting with Oklahoma, besides playing Texas in Dallas, final 2 weeks of the season, Bama at home, LSU on the road. Good luck with that. But how about Texas? Because think about Texas. Texas might be a preseason top 5 team. If first of all, they could win the national championship. But if Quinn Ewers comes back, a lot of guys on defense, a lot of guys on that O-line, Texas might be the number 1 team in the country coming into next year, okay? So I bring it up solely to say this. Look at this schedule. At Michigan in the out-of-conference. Georgia at home. Oklahoma on a neutral. Now you avoid Bama, which is nice. But here's the crazy part. This is after playing at Michigan, Georgia at home, Oklahoma on a neutral. Final 3 games includes at Arkansas, at Texas A&M. Now, look, Arkansas is struggling, and we're going to wrap on Arkansas here momentarily. But A&M as well, we'll see what they are in year 1 under Mike Elko. I just bring it up because you want to talk about 2 of the craziest, most raucous environments that anyone will play in anywhere in college football next year. At Arkansas, at A&M, 2 rivals that hate your guts. Those are 2 games I can't wait for. Finally, lastly, let me say this. You want to know what was actually the number 1 takeaway that I had from the schedule release? Arkansas schedule. Of all the teams, this was my biggest takeaway, okay? Because look at Arkansas's 2024 schedule. Now, it's not by technical definition brutal early, but in the out of conference, they play at Oklahoma State. Then they play at Auburn. Remember, Auburn destroyed Arkansas this year in Fayetteville. Texas A&M on a neutral. Texas A&M destroyed Arkansas this year on a neutral. Tennessee by LSU in the middle of October. Why do I bring it up? First, they play 5 games before the end of September, okay? The 3 toughest ones, none of them are in the state of Arkansas. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. But I think there's a scenario by the middle of October, Sam Pittman could be out, and we could be looking at interim head coach at Arkansas, Bobby Petrino. I'm being dead serious. At Oklahoma State, at Auburn, A&M at home. If you are on a neutral, in Dallas, you lose those 3, it's hard to argue that you are going to have the kind of year where Sam Pittman deserves another year when most people don't think that he deserved another year this season. So if they start 2-3, maybe even lose to Tennessee at home, I'll tell you this, if they start 2-3 and then lose to Tennessee at home, Sam Pittman's getting fired going into the bye. And I don't root for people to get fired. I'm just being real here. But could Bobby Petrino be the interim? Now, a lot of Arkansas fans would say that Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator, kind of a young up-and-coming guy, defense was really good, that he'd probably get the opportunity before Bobby Petrino. And I don't think if you're Hunter Yurachek, the AD, you're really that excited to let Bobby Petrino be the interim head coach because, God forbid, he wins some games, and then you got to hire him as a 62, 63-year-old guy. But could you imagine that? By the way, I was in Fayetteville the day Petrino was officially hired, and the day he made that debut at the Duke basketball game. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I don't think I realized how much Arkansas fans love Bobby Petrino. Absolutely insane, but I don't think it's out of the question. By the way, for people who don't follow, Bobby Petrino was hired as the Arkansas OC. Something to think about. I do want to talk a little bit of college hoops, and it's interesting because it's been a pretty quiet week in college hoops overall. Now, last Saturday was awesome, and this coming Saturday is going to be great as well. This coming weekend, starting tonight with Gonzaga-UConn. Saturday, we get Kansas at Indiana. We get the CBS Sports Classic highlighted by North Carolina and UConn. And, of course, the mega showdown with Purdue and Arizona in Indianapolis. And we're going to preview all those games here in just a minute. Before we get to all of the good that is college basketball, though, there is one note from this week that feels like it's at least worth diving into, even if it's just for a little bit. And it comes from the bad side of college basketball, where on Wednesday night, the Louisville Cardinals hosted the Arkansas State Red Wolves First-year head coach Brian Hodgson, longtime Nate Oates assistant, but it is a rebuild. They were 3-7 coming in. Just one problem. They hadn't faced a team quite like the Louisville Cardinals, and they took it to the Cardinals. 3-7. They walk out 4-7, 75-63 win for Arkansas State against Louisville in the Yum Center. Let me start by saying this. I like Kenny Payne. I thought he was the right hire at the time, but I'll be blunt. This is one of the biggest debacles I can ever remember. And I'm not an advocate of firing a guy in year 2, but I just don't know how you can keep this going, because I can't think of a single thing that has gone right for Kenny Payne so far. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the debacle that is Louisville. Let me start by saying this. I got to take an L, and we're going to talk about it later. Aaron right, Aaron wrong. I thought Kenny Payne was a great hire for Louisville. Now, admittedly, the field started to thin when that job opened. Bruce Pearl wasn't coming, got a new contract. Nate Oates' buyout was insane. He wasn't coming to Louisville. So of the options that were realistic, I thought Kenny Payne was the right guy. He was an alum. He was going to unite the fan base. But essentially, since he got the job, nothing has gone right. You don't need me to go through all of it, but let's be quick. First of all, when I knew Louisville was in trouble? Before they even went 4-28 last year. Remember, the summer before was the first kind of really, truly open transfer portal with the one-time transfer rule. Guys are changing teams left and right. Dozens of impact players are going in the portal. And Kenny Payne, who's supposed to be this master recruiter, worked under John Calipari, he essentially gets none of them. The best commitment that he got was probably Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, a guy that played at Tennessee that barely stepped on the floor. So that was when I knew they were in trouble. They end up going 4-28. And I remember talking about this in the preseason with Zach Kroll on the College Hoops Daily podcast. I remember saying to him, I said, the problem with Louisville, I don't even know what you can deem a successful season after year 1. You go 4-28. It's worth noting, by the way, the recruiting was a debacle. You thought you had DJ Wagner. You hire his grandfather as a member of the staff. DJ ends up going to Kentucky anyway. Trenton Flowers commits to you right before the fall semester starts. He decides he's going to play overseas in Australia. So everything is going wrong. But what I said to come into the season, I said, I don't even know what can be deemed a successful season for Louisville. Because if you go 4-28, think about this. You go 4-28. Even if you have a 10-game improvement this year, which I didn't think was coming, but a 10-win improvement, you'd still be 14-18 overall at the end of the year. And I don't think 14-18 in year 2 at a school like Louisville is going to get the job done. And so I didn't know what the realistic expectations were. You lose your top recruit right before the season starts, but here's the bottom line. I don't think any of it matters anyway, because I don't think Kenny Payne is there for the take for very much longer. Okay. So first of all, in terms of Wednesday night, this was the problem with the Kenny Payne era. You come out, you're at home. I don't really want to say you have momentum because you've been struggling, but this is supposed to be a win that you get. Arkansas State is 3-7. First-year head coach in Brian Hodgson. This is supposed to be a game that is just a layup. It's a gimme. It's no problem. Just one problem. As I said, you come out flat, you come out uninspired, you basically come out and you're the team that we have seen from Louisville since Kenny Payne got there. It is a game where you shoot 36% from the field, they shoot 44% from the field. Essentially, we've talked about this a lot. They got out rebounded. Louisville should never be out rebounded by a team from the Sun Belt, and it was largely uncompetitive. And so you lose the game. And here is the worst part. The game itself, a loss to a 3-7 Arkansas State team. That wasn't even the worst part of the day. Did you see what happened before the game off the court for Louisville? So, okay, if you missed this story is unbelievable, okay? So there's a kid on this team named Karan Johnson, okay? And I'll be honest, I don't know much about him, but you do a quick kind of Google search on him. One of the more unique stories that you can ever really find in high major college basketball recruiting now, okay? This was a kid that committed. Nobody really knew anything about him. Nobody knew anything about him in terms of his commitment. It's Karan Davis, by the way. I think I said Karan Johnson, Karan Davis. I apologize. Commits. Nobody knows anything about him. He's basically not in any recruiting services. Earlier in the year, there were reports that he got in an altercation with Kenny Payne. Kenny Payne denies it. He's not traveling with the team. Earlier in the season, he shows up to a game. I bring it up because on Wednesday, this is what happened. This kid's tweeting out, I finished my first semester. I'm so proud, blah, 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 this and that. Shortly thereafter, Louisville puts out a statement from the university. Karan Davis announces that Karan Davis has told this coaching staff that he is planning on transferring. We wish him nothing but the best. Just one problem. This kid, Karan Davis, then puts out his own statement on social media, on Twitter, that says, I don't know where you heard that from, but I don't plan on transferring. And then he shows up at the game. And after the game, Louisville has to put out a statement that says Karan Davis has been dismissed from the team for violation of team rules. And so you talk about a situation that is just chaotic. This speaks to Louisville. They can't even kick a kid off the team right. They put out a statement that he's transferring. The kid says he isn't. Then they say he's dismissed from the team. And ultimately, to me, this is why Kenny Payne has to go. This is why Kenny Payne will go. It is because this is just a dysfunctional, completely unorganized organization that he has going on at Louisville. First of all, the on-the-court stuff is all that matters, right? If Louisville was coming off a 28-4 year, and you're losing recruits to Australia, and you got kids that are being dismissed, but they're not being dismissed, none of it matters. But you went 4-28 a year ago. As I said, the recruiting turned into a debacle. You think you're getting DJ Wagner for a minute. You hire his grandfather. He ends up going to your biggest rival anyway, as he should have, by the way. Trenton Flowers, you get this kid to reclassify. He's a 5-star. He ends up coming, enrolls for the summer, then bounces. Okay? So first of all, nothing's going right, but the on-the-court product is just abysmal. 4-28 last year, 4-5 this year. There is no effort. There is no execution, and it's not like it's getting better. You know what's crazy about their 4-5 start? There's a couple things that stand out. One, they easily could have lost 2 or 3 games more on the schedule. They beat UMBC by 1. They beat New Mexico State in overtime. They beat Bellarmine by 5. So they're 4-6 right now. I think I said 4-5. They're 4-6 right now. 3 of the wins easily could be losses. But then there are losses to Arkansas State, to a really bad DePaul team, and oh, by the way, to Chattanooga. So again, if the on-the-court product was better, this wouldn't matter, but the on-the-court product isn't better. Beyond that, and I think this is the biggest thing, everything is chaotic. It is just so obvious. And again, I'm wrong. And this doesn't mean that Kenny Payne is a bad human, a bad person, a bad husband, a bad father. That is not what I'm saying. But every single thing about this operation is chaotic. Just think about everything. Didn't do well in the portal. You say you're not going to do the NIL stuff when everybody's doing the NIL stuff. Your best recruit ends up leaving campus a month, as classes are starting. By the way, it's worth noting, this kind of went under the radar because it was at the start of football season. Your highly paid assistant coach, who's supposed to be your star recruiter, Nolan Smith, for people who missed this, he interviewed for a G League job and was trying to get out the side door. So you know that he knows that this ship is sinking and he is trying to get off. But then, and then you have the Karan Davis incident. So you can't even throw a kid off the team properly. Your lead assistant is trying to leave. Recruiting has been a mess. Not a good sign. But I think lastly, and this is the part where I think he has to go. I think the most frustrating thing, it's not just that they're bad. It's almost that Kenny Payne feels like he has no remorse for how bad they are. Like my whole thing is this. You can be bad and you can present it in a way in which you're a sympathetic figure, okay? There are ways you can do that. You can go to the podium after every game or after a loss like the Arkansas State game and say, guys, let me say this. Guys, girls, everybody here, Louisville Nation, I want you to hear this message loud and clear. These results are not okay. These results fall on me, the head coach, and we are working every single day to make sure that whatever you're seeing on the court gets improved and that we are better the next time we take the court. We're not a perfect team. We're not there yet, but we will get there. You need to give us time And you need to believe that there is nobody more frustrated about this situation than I am. That's all you got to say. It's not that hard. I made that up off the top of my head. I don't even have notes in front of me. It's that simple. But Kenny Payne goes to the podium and he's not apologetic. He said something on Wednesday night, and I'm paraphrasing, so maybe I don't want to, whatever, where he said something like, he was asked about his job status, and he's like, my only concern is these kids. And that's a noble thing to say. But what you could also say is like, hey, I understand where you guys as fans are coming from. You deserve a better product, okay? And I think that's where my frustration would be if I'm a Louisville fan. And I'm not a Louisville fan. I got Louisville fans still mad at me from stuff I said 6 years ago when Rick Pitino was the head coach. But I just bring it up because of the fact that Louisville fans do deserve better. And I think that's the frustrating part for me. Listen, at the end of the day, I'm a fan like everybody else. I pay for tickets, not for every game. I cover some of them as fans. But as an example, next Thursday night, the Rams play Thursday Night Football. I just bought tickets today. I want to go to an NFL game, drink some beers, have a good time, okay? And so I bring it up because when you commit your finances as a fan, you're not going to win every game. You hope you're not going to lose every game like Louisville is. But you're not going to win every game. But I guess what I'm trying to say is you at least want to know that the team on the court, on the field, on the pitch, on the whatever, on the ice is at least giving their best effort. Like if you lose because the other team's better, it sucks, but you could say the team tried hard. They gave it their all. The other team was better. If you're a Louisville fan that is still paying for tickets, and I don't think there's very many that are, like, that is the most insulting part of all this, is that it feels like the coaching staff doesn't care, the team doesn't care, and that's where my frustration lies. And so if I'm a Louisville fan, I'm sitting there saying, why am I spending my hard-earned money on this? Even if tickets are $2 to get into the Yum Center, which it feels like they are. I deserve better. And Louisville fans, you know what? You do deserve better. And I'll be curious to see what happens here in the coming weeks. I just don't know how Louisville can keep going on like this with Kenny Payne. And I know we said the same thing with Chris Mack 2-3 years ago, whatever it was, 2 years ago. But this is a great program, multiple national championships, and it only takes the right guy. And I'll say this, when this job opens, there's going to be some very interesting candidates. Billy Donovan, it appears as though the NBA thing is basically coming to an end. Does he want to get back into college basketball? By the way, you know who's undefeated right now? Chris Beard at Ole Miss. I know what he did at Texas was very, very, very bad. I'm not saying you should hire him, but somebody is going to try to hire him away from Ole Miss. He's a great coach. Ole Miss is undefeated right now. I don't know who else would be on the list. Jerome Tang, maybe it can. There's actually a lot of really good candidates that I think in the way the ACC is right now, where Duke's kind of figuring it out and North Carolina's there is a lot of room to move up the standings in the ACC. I'll be curious what happens, but I don't know how much longer Kenny Payne can go on as head coach. And I think he should be embarrassed because that's his university. You got to show some pride. He clearly isn't. All right. What I want to do now, very quickly, I do want to switch gears and I do want to preview what is going to be an awesome weekend of college basketball, okay? And I don't do like the big, long, lengthy previews. Like in college football season, if Alabama's playing LSU, I might do 8, 9, 10 minutes on each game. I'm not going to do that here, but I do want to share some thoughts on all of the big games going into the weekend because there are quite a few. And it actually starts tonight in a game in Seattle between the UConn Huskies and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Should mention, by the way, if you want to know how these games get put together, what is the background? How do you get these two teams on a court in Seattle? Mark Starsiak from Intersport puts on all these big events. They're running the CBS Sports Classic. They're running the UConn-Gonzaga game this weekend. He's actually going to be at both, taking a midnight flight from Seattle to Atlanta and going straight to the arena. He's going to come on in a few minutes and really tell you the business behind these major college basketball games. It was a really fun interview. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. But with that said, let's get to a preview of some of these big games, okay? So first off, tonight, as I said, UConn plays Gonzaga in Seattle. So that UConn actually arrived on Wednesday very clearly to get acclimated to the time. It's going to be a 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific time tip-off. No lines are out yet for these games, but I'll be blunt. I like UConn to win this game. And the crazy thing about UConn, I still don't think they are anywhere close to playing their best basketball, but they are absolutely dominating virtually everybody except for Kansas. And even the Kansas game, they easily could have won. They're 8-1 right now. all 9-1, excuse me, after Arkansas Pine Bluff last week. All 9 wins are by double figures. Last time we saw them in a marquee game was the Jimmy V Classic against North Carolina. Interesting thing about that game, I don't think they got their best effort. Donovan Clingan is still very much coming back from an injury that he is working through. Alex Caravan in that game missed about 4 or 5 wide open threes that I think he is going to make going forward. So UConn beat Carolina by 11, and I think there was a scenario where they really could have won that game by, frankly, probably about, maybe 20 if Alex Caravan hits the shots that he normally makes. From the Gonzaga perspective, they played last weekend against Washington. Washington, by the way, of course, has Keon Brooks. Don't forget about Keon Brooks, okay? Keon Brooks plays for the University of Washington. Listen, Gonzaga is what I told you they'd be in the preseason. I think they're actually a little bit better than I thought they were going to be. They just don't have the horses that they used to have, in large part because Tommy Lloyd, the lead assistant, is now at Arizona, and Arizona looks more like a Gonzaga team from 2-3 years ago than Gonzaga does right now. Gonzaga's good, but they're small. I know that Graham Ike and Anton Watson are averaging a lot of, statistically, they're having good seasons. I just think this is a bad matchup for Gonzaga. I think UConn's guards are going to fluster a Gonzaga team, which isn't really passing the ball well, about 13 turnovers per game. And I think they're going to overwhelm them down low with size. So I think UConn goes out to Seattle. It will be a pro-Gonzaga crowd. But I think that UConn ends up winning the game. I'll say 83-72, 83-74 maybe. I don't think Gonzaga's got the dudes anymore. I really don't. Give me UConn tonight. Let's get to Saturday. Listen, there's a major matchup between, historic blue bloods, and I know blue blood is a controversial term. Kansas at Indiana. Listen, a couple things. One, I'm not going to do this game as a big preview. Indiana, to me, everybody wants to crush them because they got destroyed by Auburn last week, and deservedly so. Indiana doesn't have their starting point guard, Xavier Johnson, and he gets up and down. He has highs and lows, peaks and valleys, but they are a completely different team with him on the court. And so I was looking at reports before this game, checking in with some people I know. There's no real indication on if he is going to play in this game. Now, I think it'll be interesting from the Kansas perspective because Kansas has played several marquee games this season, but this is actually their first true road game. So they played Kentucky on a neutral. They played in the Maui Invitational against Purdue and against Tennessee on neutral courts, or against Marquette, and against Tennessee on neutral courts. I think if Xavier Johnson plays, I think I like Indiana to win. I don't know if he's going to play. There are no credible reports. I like Kansas, but I don't love them. I'll say Indiana wins if Xavier Johnson plays. If he doesn't, give me the Jayhawks. Let's get to the big one. Certainly a team that has been a topic of conversation on this show this week. Let's start with Arizona and Purdue. And let me start by saying this. For people who do not know, this game is not on linear TV. This game is on Peacock, which I've had people ask me. That is the NBC Sports app. And unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe you can get that on I don't believe even if you pay for cable, that's like part of your cable package. And I think it is a separate standalone thing. Could be wrong on that. I'm going to be looking into it myself here in the coming day or so. But listen, Purdue versus Arizona on Peacock. I think fans are getting screwed. That's another conversation for another day. This segment's already going long. But what I'll say, I think this game comes down to what we've talked about on this show all week. How is this game refereed? Because listen, look at Purdue's results. They beat Tennessee by 4. They're plus 18 at the foul line. They beat Alabama by 6. They're plus 14 at the foul line. Now, what a Purdue fan would say is, look at how many three-pointers those other teams took. What I would say is, you got to take a lot of three-pointers when all your big guys get fouls early in the game. And so what's going to be interesting about this game, it is in Indianapolis, but a couple things. One, and I'm not saying this to be arrogant, the Zach Edey foul stuff that I've talked about on this show 2 episodes in a row, it is a conversation in college basketball right now. I've had a lot of people, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a dozen, but I would say more than half a dozen, less than a dozen, reach out to me. And, some of them have basically said, Torres, you're dead wrong on this. Some of them have said, Torres, you're dead right. Most of them have said, like, Torres, Zach Edey is a great player, but I am glad somebody is bringing this conversation to the forefront. At least have the conversation. And so I'm curious. I'm not saying I'm important enough to change the way this game is refereed, but I think it's a conversation that has been in the lead up to this game. And I do think subconsciously it could be part of the refereeing in this game. But also, Arizona's just one of maybe the one or two teams in the country that really has the dudes to match up well with Purdue. Umar Ballo, big center, played at Gonzaga for 2 years. He's been at Arizona for the last 3. He has developed into a really nice player. Keyshawn Johnson, Krivas, the big guy from overseas, the freshman who's been really good. They have the bodies to throw at Zach Edey. And what I'll be curious about is this may be the only team in college basketball, there's a couple others, but not many, that can single cover Zach Edey, that doesn't have to send 2-3 guys to him. And if it is there can anybody else step up for Purdue? Because that to me is the interesting part. When I look at Purdue, Zach Edey isn't the reason they won that game last week. It was actually Braden Smith stepping up, but I don't know if they have the second and more importantly, third guy to beat you. That was their problem last year. Zach Edey, even in the NCAA tournament, went off. It was that they didn't have that second guy that could consistently give you 14 to 18 points per game. Braden Smith has been that guy at times this year, but Arizona's size and their athleticism, I think, could give Purdue fits. So what I will say, I think Arizona wins. If the free throw discrepancy is basically the same, I actually think Arizona blows them out. I think it'll be in favor of Purdue, but I don't think I think the athleticism of Arizona at the other 4 spots, besides where Zach Edey plays, in my opinion, is going to give them fits. Zach Edey might get 25 and 12, but can somebody else get 20? I don't know. Give me Arizona 84-81 winning in Indianapolis. A couple other games, the big one, the true blue blood matchup, North Carolina, Kentucky. We could debate. Is UConn a blue blood? Is Villanova blue blood? Is Arizona blue blood? One thing, and by the way, on the other side, is UCLA a blue blood? Is Indiana? I think it's a stupid conversation. But anyway, North Carolina and Kentucky, nobody debates that. So 2 mega brands, CBS Sports Classic. And I think what's interesting coming into this one, Kentucky, obviously, Kentucky's getting healthy. I think Kentucky's the first team in college basketball history that they're getting healthy, and we're actually more concerned about them as they get healthy. Because, the problem with Kentucky is they had that small lineup, that death lineup, that they play so fast and they're so good and they're so talented. But as they've brought along the big guys, you start to wonder, is that a good thing? Is it going to hinder how they play? And so I saw Bruiser Flint, the Kentucky assistant, did a podium availability on Thursday, and he said something like, yeah, we're going to play the 2 bigs, but we're going to play just as fast. And every Kentucky fan's like, but coach, are we really? I do think, by the way, Baron Bradshaw plays really well like he did last weekend. I think they can win this game. North Carolina, very interesting. They haven't played since last Tuesday. They played UConn in the Jimmy V Classic. I actually like Kentucky to win this game because while North Carolina, I do think Baycott is going to have his way with that Kentucky front line. I think Kentucky's guards are just better. Reed Shepherd's really good. Rob Dillingham is really good. And so because of it, go ahead and give me Kentucky in that one. The second game of the CBS Sports Classic, I'll take Ohio State, a little bit more veteran than UCLA. UCLA is still trying to figure it out. UCLA just doesn't have enough scoring. They have a bunch of really good freshmen that are still figuring things out. We talked about them in the preseason. They're international guys. It's taken a little while, whatever. Go ahead, give me UCLA. And then in the nightcap, interesting one in Omaha, Nebraska. Alabama at Creighton. Both teams coming off a loss. Bama to Purdue. Creighton lost to UNLV in Vegas on Monday night or Tuesday, Wednesday night. They got to get back on track. Probably lean Creighton, but don't feel great about that. Final segment of the week. So good to be back. And I do want to go ahead and wrap with America's favorite podcast segment where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong. By now, you know the concept of the segment. Stole it from my buddy Colin Cowherd. Colin does where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong every single week. And I decided to bring it to the Aaron Torres pod for one very simple reason. It is because over the course of a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, nobody loves giving out more hot sports takes than your boy Torres. Torres said this. Torres said that you should have listened to Torres. I never shut up. Just one problem. while I get a lot of stuff right, I also get a lot of stuff wrong too. And that's why we do Where Aaron Was Right, Where Aaron Was Wrong every single week, highlighting my best takes of the week, but also my worst ones as well. Let's get to it. Where Aaron Was Right, Where Aaron Was Wrong. Where Aaron was right. So a lot of you have asked me, Torres, are you going to weigh in on the Draymond Green situation? And I'm not going to, except right here, because I don't think it's a very interesting topic. I don't think there's new ground to cover on Draymond Green, and I don't want to spend 12 minutes screaming the same thing everybody else is, which this guy is out of control. Why is that? Because I've been saying it since 2016. You know when I was out on Draymond Green? Remember in 2016, everybody remembers when he got suspended for Game 5 of the NBA Finals. But how about in the Western Conference Finals when he so egregiously, disgustingly kicked Steven Adams in a place that no man should ever kick another man? Go back and watch that video if you forgot. Remember, Steven Adams had I've never heard this before, earmuffs children. He had, what was it, a ruptured testicle or something like that. I'm sorry. It was the most crazy thing ever, and he played through it. I think it was a contusion, something, I don't know. But ever since then, I've been out on Draymond Green. I think he's dirty. I think it's cheap shots. I think now it's officially over. You can't argue that this guy, it's just, playing with an edge. It's just this, it's just that. He took a swing. He should be suspended. I hope Adam Silver actually has a backbone and keeps him suspended for a while. This guy is out of control. I think the Warriors dynasty is just about over, by the way. Draymond Green, I've been telling you since I didn't even have a podcast in 2016. I've been telling you since 2016. Now, where Aaron was wrong. I was also telling you Kenny Payne was the guy for Louisville. Clearly, he is not the guy. Right now, 4-6 overall. They just lost to Arkansas State. This is a debacle. We just talked about it. You don't need me to rehash everything I said 20 minutes ago. But the bottom line remains, this is a guy that I just don't know how you can be anything other than infuriated if you're a Louisville fan. It's not just that they're losing. It's not just that they're getting embarrassed. It is a complete lack of effort. Louisville fans deserve better. The paying customers deserve better. Bluntly, the players deserve to be coached better. This is an embarrassment. It is an abomination. Yes, I was one of those guys that said that Kenny Payne was the right man for Louisville. I was clearly dead wrong. Where Aaron was right. So, I wish I had waited a little later on Sunday to record Monday's show because I missed out on the whole Patrick Mahomes blame game thing. And listen, I like Mahomes. He is the most physically gifted quarterback I have ever seen. But I've also long thought this guy, he's a good guy, like good husband, good father. Nobody's arguing that. But he is also treated with kid gloves. And I thought for the first time, he really did not look good, and I think borderline embarrassed himself on Sunday. Listen, I don't care about the yelling at the refs on the field. That happens. It's emotion. Tom Brady's done it a million times. Michael Jordan, that's part of being a competitor. Where I was blown away is when he goes to the podium after and does the whole, well, yeah, I mean, the refs got the call right, but the fans don't show up to watch the refs. No, the fans don't show up to watch the refs, but if there's an egregious penalty, the refs have to call it, which is exactly what happened. And so I have no sympathy for this guy. Listen, it's a great story, but the bottom line is he has had almost everything break his way early in his career. Drafted by a Hall of Famer, was able to sit behind Alex Smith for a year. First 4 or 5 years of his career, he has the most dynamic wide receiver in the league in Tyreek Hill. I'm sorry. Zero sympathy for you. This is the first real adversity that you're dealing with over an extended period of time. By the way, Chiefs fans, coming back in a Super Bowl is not adversity. You're in the Super Bowl. Give me real adversity. Give me the adversity that Justin Herbert has dealt with, that Trevor Lawrence dealt with when he had Urban Meyer as a head coach. I don't feel bad for Patrick Mahomes. Felt like he's been treated with kid gloves. Think this proves it. Where Aaron was wrong. Well, I got to own it. I bought into the sky is falling, Deion Sanders, the run is over, it's a debacle. I bought into all that about 3-4 weeks ago. Have you seen what this guy has done over the last couple weeks? So the latest is that he got a commitment on Thursday afternoon, right before I started recording, from Will Shepard, the wide receiver at Vanderbilt. I think this was one of the best wide receivers in the portal, fortifies a position that didn't really need strengthening. And this is off of a weekend in which he got 4 offensive line commitments. Last week, he got a commitment from the #1 offensive tackle in America. Listen, I don't know if this guy can coach. I don't know if he's the next Nick Saban. I think he can coach because, again, he went 23-3 in his final 2 years at Jackson State. But I've said it all along. If you put this guy in front of a single recruit, he is going to be able to get that recruit interested in the school, killing it in the portal, killing it on the offensive line. Just got maybe the best wide receiver in the portal in Will Shepherd. I was wrong on Coach Prime. I had kind of given up on him towards the end of the year. They're going to be a really good football team next year. Now, it's on him to get the most out of the guys in that building, but they upgraded the talent last year, and it's going to another level this year. Let's get back to it where Aaron was right. We'll stick with football momentarily, where Aaron was right. Speaking of recruiting, I said 2 things about Nebraska football through the years. Okay. 1, love the Matt Rule hire. People want to freak out because he wasn't great in Carolina. Listen, not everybody is built for the NFL. Not everybody's built for college football either, right? College sports, college athletics. Juwan Howard was a great NBA assistant coach. He is clearly not doing very well as a college head coach. So not everybody is built for every level. But when they hired Matt Rule, I said, this is the guy they've been waiting for. But beyond that, what I've also said about Nebraska football is everyone says the 90s are never coming back, and they're not. I don't think there will ever be a time in our lives where Nebraska wins 3 national championships in 4 years. But I said in the NIL portal era, I believe they can build a team that every so often can compete in the college football playoff race in a 12-team playoff. Bring it full circle. This week, the #1 quarterback in America, Dylan Raiola, it appears as though he is ready to flip to Nebraska. It feels like it's going to happen this weekend when you have the right coach, when you have the right fan base with the right support. Now NIL is part of that. These things can happen. So excited. I'm a child of the 90s. I hope Nebraska is back. I think it'd be good for college football if they are. Would love to see the Nebraska Cornhuskers as an elite program. And I think, are they ever going to be Georgia, Bama? I don't know. But can they be really, really good with Matt Rule in the NIL portal era? I believe they can be. Where Aaron was wrong. Well, 2 weeks ago in this very segment, I was taking a victory lap on the Philadelphia Eagles. They were my preseason Super Bowl pick. They had just beaten the Buffalo Bills. And I said, oh my goodness, Torres knows the NFL as well as he knows college football or college basketball. Well, since then, obviously lost to San Francisco and got demolished on Sunday Night Football by the Dallas Cowboys. Listen, Jalen Hurts is a great story, but I think he's limited. I think he's banged up, and that defense is abominable. Listen, Dak is having an incredible year. I'm happy for the Cowboys, but that defense just got shredded like sliced cheese. I don't even know. Shredded like, fill in the analogy. It was really bad with Philly. I think they're a nice team. I don't even think they're the best team in the NFC East. Now, if they win out, they'll still get the division title because of tiebreakers and stuff. But I'm here to tell you, I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender. 2 weeks ago, I was taking a victory lap. 2 weeks later, I'm dead wrong. Finally, let's wrap with 2 more. Let's get back to basketball where Aaron was right. All right. So one of the dumbest narratives that I can ever remember, ever, was the narrative going into last year's NBA draft, which was how many guys in the league would you trade for Victor Wembanyama right now? Only Jokic, only Embiid, everybody else you would have to trade him. If the Lakers called and offered the Spurs LeBron, they would have to turn him down. I said, that is the dumbest thing ever. You mean to tell me that if the Phoenix Suns had a chance to get Victor Wembanyama, but they had to give up Kevin Durant, they would do it? Stop. If they had to give up Devin Booker, they would do it? Stop. Their window is right now. They got to win. They don't have 10 years to figure things out with Wemby. Same with the Denver Nuggets. If the Spurs called and said Jamal Murray for Victor Wembanyama straight up, the Denver Nuggets would say, appreciate your time. Sorry, not happening. Bring it up. Wembanyama is in the NBA. And have you seen the Spurs record of late? Let me pull this bad boy up just to make sure that I am correct, because I believe coming into Thursday night, the Spurs have lost 18 games in a row. They're currently 3-20, so they do not play on Thursday. And so because of it, they do not play on Thursday, which means that as you're listening to this, they are on an 18-game losing streak. They're 3-20 overall and are tied for the second worst record in the league with the Washington Wizards. Shout out to the Detroit Pistons, who are somehow worse. Listen, it was a done narrative. This kid's going to be good. He has been good, but we don't need to go overboard with the hyperbole. He'll get there. He'll be fine. And listen, if the conversation was if you could start your franchise with somebody today, he might be one or two, but it was people were claiming that they were ready to trade LeBron for him. Just stop. Let the kid develop at his own pace. Torres, as usual, was dead right on that. Finally, let's wrap really quickly. Aaron, wrong. This is a great thing to be wrong on. When Bronny James had his medical situation, I said, look, I don't know if he's ever going to play college basketball. Maybe at some point he gets cleared, but by then he might just decide to go to the NBA. Well, obviously this weekend, first game back, USC did lose to Long Beach State. Just so cool to see this kid back on the court. Listen, I don't care if he averages 20 or 5 or 7, if he's a one and done, if he's that good, if he's this, if he's that. The bottom line remains, man, that was such a scary situation. It's not the first time that it's happened. We've seen it with Keontae Johnson. We saw it with Vic Iwuchukwu over at USC last summer. But obviously with the manner of who Bronny James is, it was just mortifying. So glad he's healthy. So glad he's happy. So glad he is back to playing college hoops. And I am happy for Bronny James. All right, think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Do think it is time for me to get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the show, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify. Also, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, we just hit 30K. Do your boy a favor. Subscribe there. New episodes there. Clips there. Subscribe. If you're not following on social media, please make sure to do so. Aaron_Torres on Twitter. Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram. Aaron Torres Pod on TikTok. And I think that's it. Fun week of shows. Next week, by the way, we have a mega guest I'm so excited to share with you. And we'll still do shows Monday, Wednesday before the holiday weekend. So plenty of Torres coming your way next week, previewing a lot of college hoops. By the way, thank you to Mark Starsiak of Intersport. Appreciate his time on the show today. Time for me to go. Time for me to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. Shout out to Pat McAfee. You unblock me. I've actually been watching Pat McAfee. He does a very good radio show, so credit to him. Also, shout out Kyle Tucker, man. Well, why you always, you loser. Whatever. I'll be back on Monday. New episode, AT Pod. See you then, everybody. Take care.